Hello and welcome to another episode of My Pocket Psych, the podcast all about the psychology of the workplace. My name is Dr. Richard McKinnon. I'm a chartered psychologist and coach, and this time around I'm once again joined by Dr. Rachael Skews. Rachel, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me back on the podcast.
I mean, the audience were screaming for it. The feedback we got, I had to have you back.
Well, in the slim chance that that's true, thank you.
We're going to talk today about an event we were at together. Now talking about time on this podcast is always a challenge. It's difficult for me at the best of times. So we're recording this shortly after a coaching psychology conference, but by the time people hear this, it will be a little bit later than that. But I was keen that we had the conversation while this was all fresh in our memories. So we both presented at a coaching psychology conference at the University of Chichester, organized by Dr. Ian Tyndall. And I want to start by thanking Ian for pulling this group of people together for a whole day conference about coaching psychology and filling the place. It was sold out well in advance, which was great to see the interest, the interaction, and the fact that we have this community that comes together. So we thought we'd just share a few thoughts, a few reflections from the day. I don't know, do you want to kick us off? What was your abiding memory from this day spent doing nothing but learning about coaching psychology?
Oh, so I probably can't pick a single one, but I'll give you some of the random thoughts that are coming up through my head. I firstly have to say, Ian does the best intros I've ever had in a conference. I thought I was going to cry. He was so kind and said, there are things that you want to do in the world. That's how I feel about my work. Like, I am unhealthily attached to my work. It's a big part of who I am as a human being. And to hear the way that Ian spoke about everybody, but I wasn't prepared for the emotional reaction I was going to have, to him describing me in the way that I hope I come across. And it was just lovely. He's a great guy. And like you say, just brought together, firstly, I think for the coaching psychology community, these opportunities to connect with each other are so valuable, and great to be able to do it in person. It's still really valuable, and for other reasons, sometimes better to do it virtually, in terms of if people are having to fly around the world, that's going to have an impact, and an environmental impact. Maybe we're better off all sitting in our pajamas, watching stuff from the comfort of our own home. But wasn't it lovely to all be together, I really enjoyed
underline that so much. I mean, for me, that was meeting some people in the flesh for the first time. I got a chance to meet Ian in person, which was fantastic. I'm going to put it down now. I want Ian to read my eulogy because he had such nice things to say about everyone. But also, he's done his research. Like he knew a lot about each of the people he invited to speak. He put together a really nice program that made sense when you looked at it. And I'm not one of those people that goes to a conference and says, I'll go for that in 30 minutes and then I'm out of here. But at the same time, I saw the lineup and I want to be here for the whole day. This looks really good. These titles, these names, what people are planning to talk about. And, for listeners who aren't coaches or coaching psychologists or have nothing to do with this, what we're really talking about here is the science of coaching and the science of coaching psychology. So it's to try and share what the evidence tells us, what we learn from practice, and to bring it together so we can all learn from each other. Not so much trying to figure out what it is, but more so make use of the science so that everyone can up their game and be a better practitioner and a better researcher, or take the research and bring it into the world, because we get some researchers talking about their outcomes as well.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the things that I thought the program was a really good mix of, was applied work, theoretical, empirical testing, qualitative research, looking at the lived experience of different groups. There was a little bit of everything and a variety of approaches, but a lot of people talking about things that aligned together. So, for example, there was one of the presenters who was coming at coaching from an existential perspective. That was her approach. That was what she was talking about. And that aligns so much with my approach in acceptance and commitment coaching. And she and I were talking after my presentation and before she spoke. She was like, so are you kind of saying this? And I was like, yeah, no, I am. She was like, yeah, we're very much on the same page. So I think one of the things that an event like that, I think it does is, again, it kind of brings the community together. We can see where the overlap is. And I don't notice discord. I see a group of generous people who are willing to step into each other's worlds, try and understand, this is how you're investigating this. These are the questions that you're asking. There's integrity there. I'm coming at it from this perspective, but we have overlap.
I couldn't agree more. And
we
one
can
of the
learn
things,
from each other.
Yeah, the learning bit. I mean, I came away with absolutely reams of notes, like tons of things, questions for me, questions for the speakers, reading I need to do to learn more about what they were talking about. But someone said this to me years ago at a conference. I was being a bit judgy. Younger me. I know it's not like me, is it?
No.
But I was being a bit, that was, I'm not sure I'd go to that again. One particular session, and they said, look, people are being vulnerable. They're getting up and they're talking about what's really important to them, their work, whether it's one small research project, whether it's the beginning of their research career, or whether they're saying, look, this is the best I could do as a practitioner. This is what I'm bringing to you. And that just really struck a chord with me. And everything I go to now, I think, bravo, you're getting up, you're talking about your stuff in front of this kind of an audience, and you're being really open, which everybody was, about these are the strengths and these are the potential limitations of what I'm talking about, or these are the things we might completely agree on. These are the things where we've got different perspectives. And I suspect, although I don't have evidence for this, I suspect there's real quality conversation when people are together, because you can't be a keyboard warrior when you're sharing a space with other human beings. Whereas where people are very distant and it's virtual, it's much easier for people to just be a little bit offhand or a little bit snarky. And there was nothing but positivity in that space for the whole day, either, sparking conversations like yours, where you can see, that's another perspective and that's interesting, that challenges me, or just simply the social, the hugs, seeing people catch up. It was really, really nice.
Yeah, and there is something nice. I think you have different qualities of conversation, in the fact that you can have that conversation in that moment, So I'm sitting, having given my presentation, straight afterwards, somebody next to me or a couple of people away from me wants to talk about it. So we have that conversation almost immediately. I think when you've got virtual conferences, you lose that. You gain something, but you do lose that. That quality of just being able to talk almost immediately and get that sense. You can and there were some great examples of people who were, using techniques or wanting to give a flavour for how you might use this in practice, and being able to do that in the room and elicit feedback from people. That's I think that is easier when you're in person. Doing that virtually can be a little bit more.
Yeah, when people want to do something interactive at a conference, that's so brave. Doing that in front of this audience is brilliant. And we had some of that, some examples of skills in action. I learned a lot. I'd like to know, what was your main goal with your presentation? Because obviously our listeners weren't there. What is it that you wanted to share with the audience? What were the points you were trying to make?
Yeah. So my presentation was on technology and AI, which is a space which I think is increasingly important because of the technology advances. What I wanted to do was to tell a story, because I think there's a lot of conversation about this, but some of the people who are having that conversation haven't had the same experience that I've had. So I'm trying to share a little bit of both the theoretical and the research that I've done that is quite relevant to this. but then also some of the applied work that I've done as well. And I do that because I think this is going to be a growing area, and I want to try and help. I want to do two things. I want to help people who are already in this space learn from what I've done, and I'm also keen to embolden psychologists and coaching psychologists in particular to step into that space. And I think a lot of psychologists, we tend to be interested in people, and we tend not to be necessarily so technologically minded. I know that's a sweeping generalization, and I can see you smiling at me because you probably are quite technologically.
I'm just looking at my desk.
Forward, you know.
The sheer volume of devices here.
Yeah.
I get your point, though, because it is for that audience. Hey, what are the implications of this technology that you might only encounter in headlines or on social media? So let's hear it from someone who's looked at the potential applications of technology in coaching and behavior change and well-being, not a frightening headline or a rumor, which is really important.
And I think one of the things that I wanted to do was take people on that journey. So that journey for me started in my doctoral research, where I was looking at mechanisms of change or processes of change in acceptance and commitment coaching. So we've got some good data on that. And one of the variables that we looked at was working alliance, or people might talk about the coaching relationship. And so I suppose it was kind of on my shoulders. I take the blame of all the analyses of rubbish. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to see whether or not the coaching relationship was a process of change, because it's talked about that in the literature, but nobody had really tested it. So I tested it, and spoiler alert, there was no empirical evidence that it was mediating any change within acceptance and commitment coaching. And I said this at the conference, that was a surprise. It's not what I thought I was going to find. It's not what the coaching literature, or indeed the therapeutic literature. What does that mean? Well, it means that whatever's going on, whatever makes acceptance and commitment coaching effective, isn't dependent on working alliance, which is the bond that people have together, the agreement on their goals, agreement on tasks, those kinds of things. It's something else. Now, that doesn't mean that human-to-human relationships aren't important, but what I think it does mean is that it allows us to expand into technology where there isn't a human involved, because the processes of change are something other than the relationship between the coach and the coachee.
It's such an interesting point, because when you put it that way, it's not saying it doesn't matter who your coach is or how they behave. Yeah, it does. But that's not the main thing that's going on here.
Yeah.
And so much of the, I'm going to call it kind of received wisdom, is that, you got to find someone that you click with and then you're off to the races, when we've made the point previously that coaching that's not based on sound theory is not a very good use of anyone's time. Atheoretical coaching is not going to get you the results. And we know that from what research has shown us, and that's not new. So this isn't necessarily a threat to person-to-person coaching or therapy or anything else. If anything, I would argue this opens it up to more people, and it doesn't impact the bottom line of coaches. In fact, more people around the world could get access to these kinds of results, but working with an electronic solution, a technological solution, rather than a human.
Yeah. And so one of the things that came up in the talk was, how do you engage people? So there is this question of change. So what that research was saying is, it isn't to do with the relationship. The relationship isn't causing the change, but it might be doing something else. And I pointed to some literature by other researchers, which has been around for a long time. Since 2011 was the kind of model of supportive accountability that I gave everybody the reference to. That's quite a long time. But what that is it's saying that there are like technology delivered things, health programs health interventions, coaching interventions, anything within the technology. But what you find is, and this is a robust finding, that if you have a human-human relationship in there somewhere, that improves people's engagement with the technology. So, we are not, in my opinion, my humble opinion, we are not going to be replacing human coaches with chatbots. Coach bots are going to be quite limited in their impact because, okay, some people are going to like that. Some people might prefer to use an AI to having a human-human interaction for a variety of different reasons. And there are researchers looking into that. But actually, if somebody's really struggling, I think especially I would say within the leadership space where people have got complex jobs, complex challenges, it's highly interpersonal, and therefore they have to do a lot of intrapersonal work. It's not just set a goal, go out, achieve that goal. You're doing things that are a lot more complicated about humans, how we think about ourselves and how we relate to others. I don't think you're going to get AI replacing the human-human coaching interactions. But what you might have is, let me send you something on the app, which you can be doing between session.
Yep. Yeah. And I was just thinking, you will also note the difference between this is a really nifty app versus this is an app that's actually based on sound research data, that the evidence supports it. So just because it's an app, it doesn't mean it works. In the same way that just because someone says they're a coach, it doesn't mean they're going to get any results. So the most important part here for anyone watching or listening who is slightly bemused by this is you need evidence to support what you're recommending. And it's not just one study or two studies. It's the cumulative evidence that shows us this is pretty sound. We can say we're pretty sure this works well. And as long as that's the underpinning of what you're doing, then you can feel a bit better about this is a good solution. So no matter what it is, person or app, I keep pointing at my phone, for a person or app, we still need to ask the questions. What's the method? What's this based on? How does it work? Rather than accepting it at face value.
And I think the other interesting element, which I didn't talk about on the day, but the conference as a whole got me thinking about, is that the different processes have changed that we would be activating within ACT. So we've got psychological flexibility. That's what we're really kind of trying to help people to increase. But we might do that in different ways. We might, provide a little bit of learning within the coaching around how our minds work and how people might be able to relate to their own minds in a certain way that could be more effective in particular situations, undermining this idea that we can just get rid of a thought. That I do that a lot with coaches. I talk a lot about that. And I do that through different metaphors. But really what I'm doing is I'm helping them learn. And so other coaching approaches, they will be providing similar learning. So we're all kind of doing the same thing often. We might be doing it in different ways. And these different processes through which the change occurs in coaching is what I'm really, really interested in. And in fact, there was there's a few different coaching meta-analyses out there at the minute. One of the most recent ones was suggesting that integrated psychological approaches were the most effective. And I thought about this. I don't think they included any ACT studies, which is a bit of a shame. But I still think what that probably means is that coaching approaches that use integrated techniques, so techniques from a couple of different theoretical approaches, are probably activating a variety of different processes of change. That's what I think is going on. If you just use GROW in your coaching, you're going to be activating some stuff, but you might not be activating all of the ones that you might if you're using something like acceptance and commitment coach, just as two examples.
Exactly. And that coaching toolkit that practitioners can reach into on a case-by-case basis and say, I think this is a good way of helping this person get where they want to be. Whatever it might be, it needs to be intentional. It needs to be based on the presenting topic, issue, challenge, as opposed to, this is coaching. This is just, no matter who it is and what it is, this is coaching. Because that's GROW. grow as a way of structuring a conversation. That is not coaching. That is a tool you would use in a coaching conversation. And so that's the theory versus method, maybe, distinction that we could make. And so what I really enjoyed was hearing conversations and being involved in conversations at that conference where people were saying, oh, that thing you're working on is a lot like what I emphasize, or I use that, but in this way. So that topic of self-efficacy came up, and strength came up. And I was looking at all of this through the lens of ACT, going, yeah, I totally get that. And I understand why it works. And I understand how it works. That makes sense. We're using potentially slightly different labels, or we're talking about adjacent concepts. But you know what? They're hitting the target for the client. That's what matters.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think sometimes if people can get, researchers can be like this as well, but I think often people who are looking into research communities assume we're all in our little spot telling everybody else that they're wrong. And I don't think that's helpful. I love science, I love philosophy. I won't bore on about that, I promise. But I think good research, good science, you have to be looking outside of your own little world, that bit that you know. So for me, it's acceptance and commitment coaching. I know it really well. I know, more than the average bear. And I could sit there and say, no, you're all wrong. But I don't think that's good science. I think good science is, what are you doing? How is that similar to what I'm doing? How can we learn from each other? Where is the consilience? Where is this? Good science hones in on things that seem to be, the case, observably the case. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm interested in. Not whether or not I'm right or wrong. I don't care. I'll change, I'll adapt. But I want to know, what is it that you know? You tell me what you know, I'll tell you what I know, and let's learn from each other. That's good science.
Yeah, and it's an evolution of method, evidence, approaches, because we learn more as time goes on. So I know it's frustrating for people when they read these news reports about scientists have discovered X. And I go, no, they've changed their minds. Well, no, understanding has evolved because better research has been done that maybe points to something else. We'll always get conflicting results. That's science. And anyone who talks about right versus wrong is missing the point, as you said. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about how can we move things forward? How can we be more sure of what we're saying, but keeping our minds open to, well, something else might come along to knock all of this over. And I think it keeps you humble, really. When someone does stand up and say something surprising based on their research, you think, I did not know that, or that had never occurred to me, or they're asking questions. Maybe I was too lazy to explore. They're doing it. It's great. Yeah. So I think that ethos, as long as people are bringing that sort of scientific mindset, then you can have a whole different conversation.
I think one of the other things about the conference, and I think this is generally what makes a good conference presentation, learning experience, I think when people can make it very accessible, and particularly within our field, really talk about what does this mean in practice? Because I think with some different areas of like psychology or science or various other academic areas, it's not so important. I think with coaching and coaching psychology, it isn't just that we want to know things, but we want to know things so we can use them. And I think one of the things that struck me is that pretty much every single presentation, every single speaker, it was all stuff where it was anchored in, what does this mean for practitioners? Because I think sometimes practitioners, if you're hearing something that's too theoretical, it's too difficult to then say, well, what does that mean I do differently with my clients?
I totally agree. I think everyone did a great job of that. I would also say, though, any conference I've been to, academic conferences, professional conferences, the messages that stay with me are the ones where someone has used metaphors, imagery, because they've been able to explain their very difficult concepts in a way that anyone in the room can get it, because there's no bar to entry for these things. Pretty much anyone can attend, and anyone does. And sure, there might be lots of your peers there, but if you're not there to try and help as many people as possible understand your stuff, then you are kind of just talking to your friends. So I think translating it and we had such a diverse group in Chichester, because I heard the conversations, people's backgrounds from all these different contexts, and so it was really important that everyone did that. And I think all the presenters did a great job of that, bringing it to life. A little bit of scene setting, a little bit of storytelling, but also, where I am if you want to know more. Come at me with your questions or your requests for literature.
Yeah.
There's a generosity there I think is really nice, as opposed to, I've got a product I can't tell you much about, I just want you to buy it. Don't question, there's a black box here, I can't show you the insides. When I think there's there's a humility to saying, look, here's my homework, what do you think? Scrutinize it, please, because that's the only way that we'll get better. So, I mean, I leapt there with my brain buzzing, tired, but my brain was still working until I got back to London, thinking, that's a good point. So really, really enjoyable. So once again, big thanks to Ian. I'm not going to bang on about what I spoke about at the conference, because what I decided to do, because I got lots of inquiries about it, because I mentioned it on LinkedIn, I'm just going to speak to my slides and record it and then make it available on YouTube so that people can access it and get the slides there. So I'll be posting that in the usual places when that is available. But any other standout points or thoughts that you left with, Rachel?
Oh, I mean, there was loads. It's really difficult to say this is... I think what it left me with was I find getting a sense of the bigger picture. That's what I really enjoy. And sometimes, like I said, you can be in your own little island and not really connect with the people around who are doing slightly different things, or they might be doing it in a different way, asking different questions that, like, we don't have the scope to do everything. I really wish we did, because there's so much that I want to do, so many questions that I want to try and tackle. But I think that's where the strength of the community comes in, that we don't have to, if we are willing to share and we're going to be open and we're going to, it's not about creating a product to make money from. It's about learning and sharing, because I think that's how you get good work, which is not to say that, we understand there's a commercial aspect to the work that we do. But I think one of the things as a researcher in this space, I almost feel like that's something I can help with. I can help with the learning. I can help disseminate good practice. I can help people think about these things. I can help people feel more comfortable consuming research. I think that's one of the big things, is that some people don't feel confident in, especially with empirical research, quantitative research. I think people can be quite unsure. I don't want to say afraid, because I think that might be a bit too strong. Yeah. But they're not sure of, I read a paper, I don't really know what it means, or I don't understand, some of the implications from it. They're just not confident in engaging and consuming that type of research sometimes. And I think what I hope to do, one of the things that I hope to let be in the community, is somebody who can help people be more confident with that. Because I think there's a lot of great practitioners, and within our field we need to kind of bring these things together as much as we can. The theory and the practice shouldn't be apart. These should be working together. We should be learning from each other. So, but that's a whole other podcast topic, in my opinion.
We'll get that in the diary.
Yeah, I'm doing some work on that from the perspective of what is available in terms of independent practitioners who want to do some research or to contribute some research in some way. And there's a whole variety of different things that might mean. But how do they get ethical approval for something? How do they get support if they're not going to have an affiliation with a university? Not everybody wants to do a degree or a master's or a PhD or whatever. So how do we harness the hive mind of the coaching psychology community. So I will try and let you know.
Thank you, because I mean that's partly why this exists, to be able to communicate science to people in an accessible way. And there are so many people out there who they'd even fall at the first hurdle, I might argue, which is, how do I get my hands on a journal article? Never mind understand it. So there's a lot of structural, systemic barriers to people getting their hands on science. So the more we can do to help people, then everyone benefits, Everyone benefits from understanding more, from understanding how things work, from raising the bar of coaching psychology. That was a big part of that day. We're both passionate about that, and I just wish that more people had been able to see that day, the people especially who maybe don't hold coaching in quite high regard, to see, look at all that in one day, look at all that science, look at all of that good practice. So hence we're talking about it today. But I really hope, and I have said it publicly, I hope it's a permanent fixture. I hope Ian does this again next year, because I think it could be a highlight of the various conferences we find ourselves going to.
I would agree. It was excellent, really excellent.
Rachael, thank you for joining me again. I'm going to put some links to various things that were shared at the conference. If people want to find out more, especially who was there, what were they talking about, and things like that. And of course, you can get in touch with us with any questions you have about anything we've covered today. podcast@worklifepsych.com. Any follow-up questions or comments, and broaden this out. What is it you'd like to know more broadly about coaching and coaching psychology? I thought we could use this episode as a jumping off for, let's underline, it's science we're talking about, science in practice, but we're open to trying to answer any questions you might have. So please do get in touch. Rachael, thanks for making the time again. Good to see you again. And I have to say, it was great to see you in the flesh at that conference, because we're so far apart most of the time.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And thank you for doing this. Thank you for creating the space to have these kinds of conversations, because I think it's really important. So,
well, Ian is coming on as well to talk about his work. So again, had another opportunity to increase the network of talented practitioners and researchers who are happy to give up an hour or so to say, look, here's an audience that are interested. So I'm very happy to be the conduit of that, even if I'm not producing the research myself. Rachael, thanks again. I will see you soon. And everyone else, thank you for listening.